Well, gold member's done, which means now I gotta figure out what the next thing is gonna be. And then this arrived from Australia. Whenever anything comes from Australia, you know it's gonna be good. I think that's actually the title of this video. So it's not clickbait.
Hey, Jay. Jay. Jay.
What?
We got work to do.
Yeah, I'm playing World of Warships. Yeah. World of Warships is the free-to-play naval strategy game where you command the most iconic and famous warships from World War I and World War II, recreated with stunning detail and accuracy. Build your fleet while participating in various game types while upgrading your ship's arsenal along the way. New players who sign up using my link below will receive an exclusive starter pack to get you up and running quickly by receiving 7 days premium time, 1 million credits, 300 doubloons, and the Tier 5 premium ship, the Exeter. So what are you guys waiting for? Start sinking ships with World of Warships by heading to the description below and getting your freebies. You know, it's funny. We don't let anybody just send us stuff without telling us, except Singularity. I think they're the only brand I let just ninja ship stuff to us, because it always ends up being something good and interesting. Even though I don't like everything that we've gotten from them, but yeah, you have to give credit where credit's due, and Daniel just continues to design and come up with stuff. I'm very envious of the fact that he has the ability to tool and manufacture this sort of stuff. Remember, Singularity Computers is actually what our distro plate block pump thingy thing is in there for Gold member. If you're wondering why it's still up and running right there, it's now on its 72nd hour of loop testing to make sure no leaks and stuff happen. So anyway, moving forward, let's see what this is. I know it's a case. I don't know if it's pre-assembled. I don't know if it's flat packed or not. He did send me an email saying, hey, this is on its way, but I more or less just glanced at it because it wasn't that important at the time. Now I should probably re-glance at that email. I'm a little concerned though, only because as much as I love Daniel at Singularity Computers, I don't love his documentation, or should I say lack thereof usually. So it's usually an experiment to figure out how this stuff goes together sometimes. Well, there's two options here. It says Absolute Impact Case and Absolute Impact Water Cooling Case. Absolute Impact fits a 1x420mm radiator in the front and up to 45mm thick. It has been properly designed for water cooling with ample space for tubes, tube runs, radiator, and fan clearances, etc. It comes in a standard and water cooling version. It sounds very water cooling already as standard. Anyway, water cooling versions, which includes a distribution plate, which has a D5 or DDC, select below, and a reservoir combination. The standard version is also water cooling capable, does not include a distribution plate. The case has no rivets, so it can be broken down to the individual pieces and easily reassembled afterwards. It is constructed from 1.5mm black powder coated steel, 5052 black anodized aluminum, and CNC machined acrylic. Okay, well, it's the Absolute Impact. Please let it be absolutely assembled, because I think it is, actually, thank God. I honestly don't know if this is also the retail experience. I assume it is. So the price of this case, let's just start with that real quick, because sometimes the Singularity stuff can get pretty expensive. Now all the accessories seem to range from about $29 to $149. Oh, because they have a power board option for this. So $259 to $369. So I'm assuming $259 is the standard, $369 is gonna be the water cooling version of it. That's actually not bad. Keep in mind, please, when you think about pricing from something like Singularity, these guys are low volume. Okay, they do not get, MOQs or minimum order quantity from manufacturers are in the thousands or tens of thousands. I guarantee you Daniel is not getting any sort of MOQ discounts. So please know, this is a very independent type of designer and manufacturer. So these prices are not gonna be ever something that is like mainstream or mass produced, because they're not. Okay, so it looks like one of the case walls is the distro plate, which is kind of neat. So that's obviously what makes it, look, I undid it. So as you can see, one of the case walls is actually the reservoir distro plate thing in there. So that's pretty cool.
Reservoir.
I know. This is the back of the power board right here. So you can see he's got, well, that's kind of neat. It's almost like a trace in there. That's not like etched. That's like a imprint of like a circuit trace. That's pretty cool right there. Okay, one thing I'm kind of not a fan of already, the feet on the bottom are plastic. So they're like 3D printed. There's no rubber. So I already feel like I need to put some rubber or something on there to stop it from sliding, because it just, slides pretty easy. This piece right here, so I wouldn't go pushing on it and stuff unless you're gonna bow it, but this is one of the 1.5 millimeter thin. That's not like Thor making Mjolnir. I'm not a fan of acrylic windows though, because they scratch as you try and clean them. No matter how careful you are with them, microfiber, micro plush, whatever, they scratch. So I would love for this to be a piece of beveled glass. Like, to be honest, that's the one thing, in my opinion, that keeps Singularity from being kind of in the area of perfect, is their acrylic windows. But I can't imagine it'd be cheap. This would be an easy piece of glass to make though, simply because of the fact that it's a rectangle. There's like nothing crazy about it, and there's nothing holding this either, so when I go to undo the screw, it's gonna wanna fall. So I'm touching it right now, which means I'm gonna have to wipe it, which means it's gonna have scratches immediately. Ugh. It's pretty thick acrylic though. But yeah, I mean, this could honestly be made in glass. It should be. Jesus, Daniel. Damn, Daniel. That's not a reference anyone does anymore, huh? So it's got a built-in little riser deal on here, which is probably gonna have some flex. It ties in up here. This part is obviously adjustable. It's a smaller screw. It's adjustable up and down depending on the location of where this is. It's basically the same system like the Spectre has. So this one obviously has the power board on here, as you can see. I like how high the standoffs are. This would allow you to actually run cables and wires underneath the motherboard too, if you wanted to. You could obviously run an EATX board on this, but given where this fitting is right here, you have to be mindful that you're not running too big of a board. Otherwise, it could overhang over that fitting, and there's no other fitting along the way. So that is the output. This is the fill port. And then it goes from here, like fills this area up and then back into the reservoir. So they already come with the cables that you'll need if you get the power board edition. You might look at that and go, what the heck, why is it like that? Well, that's because once you bend it, it's going to make the outside radius, right, the longer one, go flat, like that. So if they were the same length, obviously you'd need longer length of the outside, and then it would be all like, I can't even do it there, do it that way. See how it's all like kind of stupid looking? So it'd be kind of like that. So now you gotta really hope that your motherboard, 24 pin, it's gonna go like that. Anyway, we'll put a board in there and we'll look at that in a sec. Same thing with the EPS 810. Power board has some fan headers right here. Has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ARGB, which is nice. 3 more fans right there, 24 pin. 6 pin supplemental for the motherboard if you need it. 24 pin, another 24 pin, then 4 PCI Express, and then on the bottom down here, that's where your inputs are. Yeah, so down there is where you go from your power supply to plugging into the power board. So that's how you distribute the power. The idea there is that keeps this from having cables kind of going up everywhere, because the idea is to have tubes do that. Okay, this is the Absolute Impact accessories. We has a whole bunch of standoffs, but so okay. So this is vertical mount is also an accessory. You can ditch this bracket right here entirely. It's crooked right now anyway. You lose this panel. This, I believe, is going to invert. Connect here, then you can do standard graphics card. So it doesn't have to be a vertical mount graphics card. And the reason why I was kind of concerned earlier is the distance between this vertical mount and that acrylic panel is pretty close. So the only air that's entering this system is what's gonna be coming from the front through the radiator, which already has to now come in through these gaps right here. I suppose if you really wanted to, you could just take off these standoffs in the front panel and just have it be free flowing. I don't see why you couldn't do that. But I was a little concerned about the gap here. I mean, there's I don't know, about that much between the fans and the panel, which is probably plenty. but you're not stuck going vertical. You can convert this to a more standard horizontal. Because my first thought was like, why are they giving us these I/O shields or these I/O covers if it's vertical mount? But that's why, because it can be converted. Which means with the thickness of this case, you might run into a problem with some graphics cards on its height. Nick, can you grab me the Astral? I want to see if it will even fit in here. Oh yeah, you definitely wouldn't want to vertical mount this at all, because it doesn't even fit in vertical. It sticks out of the case. I guess I could just leave the acrylic off and just do top and bottom and let it pull in cold air. I bet you anything that's by design. I would not be the least bit surprised if Daniel designed it this way on purpose. I could just fit fans there now and not water cool, which would make this look really silly with its distro plate built in, because this is the water cooled edition. So I would say doing this would make sense with the non-water cooled edition. But yeah, considering this is one of the biggest 5090s out there right now, I just was curious. Here you go, Nick. But I do like that it would just have literally fresh air going into it, and dust and dog hair and cat hair and whatever else you got in your house. So they do have a quite nice manual, by the way. So Daniel, thank you for the manual. I love that it rhymes. Daniel's manual. Anyway, so this gives you access to plugging everything into the power board once your power supply and everything's in here, which is kind of nice. That up top is actually a touch button. So it is I forget what it's called, but capacitive. Yeah, so you touch it and that's a button. Anyway, our reset button back here, or technically any button you want this to be. This could be a clear CMOS button too, by the way. So if your motherboard doesn't have, say, a clear CMOS button back here and you don't care for a reset button, I never use reset at all. I never use reset. So this would actually be a nice feature to plug into a more dumb motherboard that just has like a 2-prong jumper on it. You could wire this up to the 2-prong jumper and then you have a clear CMOS button. So that's kind of nice. But let's do this right now. Let me just kind of do maybe a quick build in this, not water cooled, but just to kind of check the clearances and all that sort of stuff, so I can kind of get some ideas of how I feel about this whole layout. My only initial concerns here are potentially going to be airflow. I only say that because we have a thin gap on the side, which, as we know, is not going to be as good as leaving it full open. They do have optional vented panels. I would have preferred that one versus the solid panel, because I'm more about airflow than anything else. So you could also take this off entirely. Let's see how ugly that looks real quick before we move forward. So I know I said that I was gonna just kind of throw some stuff in here and then come back, but I wanted to talk about something. First, we found where the plug is for the power button, the touch power button. It's actually under the board back up here at the top. Like, it's not labeled. See, everything's labeled on the front, but there's no label for it. Right there on the power board, which usually would draw your attention, but it's right there by the top. That's fine. You have to take the top off to even plug in the EPS. Like, you physically, and that's gonna be such a tight. I'm a little concerned about that, if that's gonna even clear, if you wanna know the truth. And to do that, you have to take the top panel off. And then we noticed, ours actually has damage right here. It looks like it was scraped along something. It's actually ground flat right there. So that unfortunately came damaged. To get the top off, we have to undo 1, 2, 3, 4. The 2 standoffs for the front have to come off. And then there's one here that holds the power board on, or not the power board, but the other half of the acrylic piece. And it's probably gonna be very hard to assemble this, but a lot of these panels are kind of bent or warped. Like that one has a big bend in it. If you look along it like this, look at that. It's a big warp in it. The EPS looks like the only ones that I have to undo this to get them on. Like everything else I could get on, it's like fan headers and stuff. Okay, there we go. Nailed it. Huh. Okay, I do wish there was some sort of active exhaust on the top, to be honest. I didn't see that as an, oh wait, that's not the right screw. I did not see that as an option, but I'd like to be able to put a couple fans on top or something just to assist with the exhausting of it. I've tested plenty of cases where it seems like a good idea where all they have is intakes. You're asking a lot of those fans to pull in through any resistance in front of the radiator, through the radiator, and then have to have that same air pressure push itself out through exhaust. Assisted exhaust is always better than nothing. Like if I had the ability, I would probably, I'd put like a 120, at least a single 120, something to assist, you know? So if you don't, you have to plug in all this stuff first, by the way, your fan lead that goes into your power board, your ARGB lead that goes into your power board, because once you put the motherboard on it, you can't see them anymore. So there's a very specific order of operations. One thing I want to point out too, this is a 420 rad. It's very old and been used. That's why the insides are green. They've been stained by coolant. But when you put this in, there's plenty of room if you're using a slim rad for push-pull, but it also looks like the top fitting lines up pretty well with the return fitting for the reservoir. So that's kind of cool. The only thing is there's not a lot of height between here and here. So I think if you would use a straight fitting, probably just the right height standoff or like a spacer and then a 90, you could go straight pipe right into it. So that's kind of neat. It's going to vary based on the rad though. Every rad's different in terms of where they put those fittings, how thick the end tank is, etc. But you can easily fit a fat radiator in a single push or pull, or a thin rad, which that is, it's a slim rad, and a push pull. I don't know which I would prefer. I don't know if I would prefer a push pull on a slim or a high static pressure fan on a fat. I think personally I would put it on a fat rad if I was doing like a 4090, 5090, high power CPU or something like that. If you were doing something lower like a 4080, you know, something that's well under 500 watts, like a 360 watt rad or a GPU or something like that, and like an AMD CPU, yeah, a slim rad would be perfectly fine. Yeah, so the top panel really should just be loose or off when you're building, because the fan input wire for the power board, and again, this is a power board specific thing, is back here, all the way in the top left. So it's really hard to get up in there and install anything with the top panel on. So I'm thinking the top panel, at least loose like I had it, is ideal. Probably off for the better, that way you're not accidentally bending it more than it already came. Now you can access everything, but it's just kind of flimsy now because there's nothing really holding it together. One thing I want to point out right now is by taking the top off, this piece instantly cracked and broke in the corner. So that right there is purely aesthetic. That's not going to affect the power board at all, but this little piece fell out and then we saw that. And that could simply be because I was like, whoa, but you know, this is one of the reasons why I go through these types of videos now where I actually start building in these cases, because stuff like this pops up, you know. To reach the top and make it most accessible, you got to take the top panel off, and that is a result that happened. So, and I'm not being, to be honest, I'm not being overly like rough with this thing. I'm trying to actually not be. Okay, the motherboard is installed. At this point, I sure hope any cooler that you had installed, which by the way, you're not gonna fit a very high cooler here. I need to look at the manual and see if it gives a clearance. This is a very narrow design for water cooling type of case. But if you're block, or if you're running an Intel board, or your air cooler, if you have a low profile cooler, requires any sort of access to the back, I sure hope you did it before you put it on the power board. Now, obviously it's not that hard to get it back off the power board, but one thing I wanna point out is because we do have two sets of standoffs, and you have to tighten down into it. If you over tighten the screw and you go to undo it, you're gonna undo a bunch of different random standoffs with it. I already did that. So you know when you go to take a screw off the motherboard and you're like, dang it, and the whole standoff turns with it and you have to use the pliers to get, gonna have to do that multiple times on this one now. So that's unfortunate, but whatever. Okay, so that's on there now. It's very top heavy, as you might imagine, because it's a narrow case and the motherboard is up top. This is probably where I would at least put the power supply down here to get some ballast weight. I kind of want to see if this will support the 5090 Astral. Oh, and then one other thing I want to do real quick. So the EPS is in there, as I showed you. It's not really pushing on it too bad. It's not that big of an issue. It's really not. It's not like this is a 12 volt high power cable where you put a little bit too much pressure on it and you're probably going to melt your cables because they start to pull out. That's not really the issue with the 12 volt. 24 pin. It's kind of nice. I don't know if you can see it through the grill, but the power board and the 24 pin here are exactly lined up. That's not always going to be the case for every motherboard. If they're slightly misaligned, it's kind of dumb because then it starts looking all weird. But this one does appear to be on the exact same alignment. So let's go ahead and plug this in and see. There we go. It's very pleasing that it's on the exact same plane. Now, if you're using a motherboard that has a 90-degree 24 pin, it's not gonna work. Okay, it's just not gonna work. It needs to be pointing up. And I've experienced that with like the Spectre and the power board and stuff. So 90-degree, it would be sticking straight out and you'd be putting a crazy bend on it. It has to be sticking up off your motherboard, not pointing out long ways, like on the same plane as a motherboard. This is considered a 90-degree technically. It's considered a 180 degree going that way. Just want to point that out. So it needs to be like this, pointing up. Otherwise, you're going to have an extreme issue trying to plug in your 12 volt high power, or not 12 volt high power, but your 24 pin if you're trying to run the power board. Now, I do wish they had an extra comb in this because I would like to have a comb back here, one there, and then like one right there. But they only put 2 combs on here. So I got to kind of pick my battle here. But yeah, being on the exactly straight plane is so much more pleasing than when they're slightly off. Okay, so I'm not sure which way I should put the fan. I guess like that would be fine. When we mount it down though, I think the power supply is gonna actually become the support bracket for the graphics card, which is kind of neat. I would probably put some rubber, like a thin rubber piece or something under here, because any vibrations, like from the graphics card could potentially cause a problem there. So I should theoretically now be able to mount this guy. Ugh. Ow. Oh, okay, I can't see what I'm doing here. This is such an expensive, I could have got this all lined up with a cheap card, you know. There we go, look at that. So now that can rise up to right there. Tighten that down. Now I feel like I'm holding up a drunk friend that's puking right now. It's okay, man, just let it out. You're good, bro. See, it's not the most secure because there's nothing holding the bottom right there. So it just, so because there's no tab here, this thing just kind of like flops around. Now granted, it's a very heavy graphics card. There's no mention of it in the manual, but you can actually just screw it down into the case. That's a lot better than it was. I mean, it's still a little wobbly because the whole chassis is flexing because of the weight of this card. But we know the weight is being supported by the power supply. In fact, I kind of feel like if I was to loosen the power supply now and like wedge it up a little bit, because there is a little bit of play in these holes, we could probably get a tighter fit on the GPU. So that's what it looks like with an air-cooled Astral card in there. To be honest, like that only works because of the size of the card. The card is so big, it really fills that, oops, I did it the wrong way. That way, that way, that way. Anyway, I still wouldn't do it this way though, because you'd be limited to such a small air cooler, unless you're just gonna leave that cover off too and let the air cooler stick out the top, which you absolutely could do. Accessories, I think they should make for this. One of the things I said is if I were building this for me and I was doing a fully water-cooled build with this, I obviously would not have a air-cooled graphics card sticking out of it. It would still be able to be a vertical mounted GPU, but with the GPU there vertical with the block on it, it still would be somewhat blocking off the view. And I kind of like to see the inside of my systems. I like to see, you know, I like Windows and RGB and all that sort of stuff. So I would like to see panels available for these in acrylic. The only thing that sucks is like once you take it apart and then start mounting parts in there and then have to put it back together, it sure as hell likes to kind of discombobulate itself and get everything to line back up. Puts a lot of tension on the parts, so you have to be careful, obviously, installing acrylic panels on the front. That way you don't crack the corner off like happened on the other corner. But I think it's a neat build. Like the whole concept of this is just so different. Let's see, so if I were to now put this back on, like I put the larger standoffs on there, so I have no concerns about whether or not there'd be enough airflow for that. But I was thinking about it, I'm like, wait a minute, if I needed like push-pull, I could do a fatter radiator, like a 45 mil. I couldn't do like a 60 mil plus fans because it would hit the pump. But I could do like a 45 mil and then fans on the inside and do fans on the outside right here and sandwich it. And then to make it clear, I mean, they give you plenty of frickin' standoffs. You could just, you know, we heard you like standoffs, so we made standoffs for your standoffs. And then you can just keep adding standoffs to it to give more thickness. That way, then you'd have room to actually put, you know, fans on this side or potentially even a radiator on this side if you wanted. But look at that, I mean. It's all it's kind of ridiculous. And you still have plenty of space in front of the fan. There's plenty of volume in front of there for it to be able to pull air in. So you can have fans on the outside, radiator fans on the inside, get push-pull, lots of airflow. So I like that they give you the tons of standoffs because then you get all those options. I like it in the sense that it's different than anything we've seen. It really sort of changes the way you think about a PC case. I also love the fact that they give you the pass-throughs. So if you want to use one of their water boxes or something as an external water cooling device, you could. That'd be a bit overkill, considering I think a 420 is good enough for most systems. I'm not sure a 420 would be necessarily enough for like a 5090 and like a 14900K, or even an overclocked like 9950X3D with PBO. So this 9950X3D in Goldmember right there does have PBO enabled with an undervolt, like a -20. And when I did my temperature testing and all my validation on that system to make sure it's solid, and I was looking through all my CSVs and charted it out, it's actually pulling over 250 watts. So it does pull more than the 180 or 190 watts it says, because once you enable PBO, it allows itself to pull a lot more, even with the negative 20 millivolt. So you could easily overpower a 420 millimeter radiator. You really could. That's why a thicker one would be better, because of the fact that it at least gives you more surface area, which means more cooling. But it's a video for another time, where the thickness of the rad actually plays lesser of a role than the overall length and width of the rad. So having a fat rad that's double the thickness of, let's say I took a 420 by 60 and compared it to a 420 by 30, you're not getting double the cooling power. It's an exponentially negative kind of a curve. I've tested that a million times, and that's why I always prefer to put the biggest surface area radiator that I can versus going a smaller rad that's thicker. So we are a little limited in this one simply because of the location of where the pump is. Now, potentially going with a DDC would fix that problem, because the D5 is so long it sticks out, but DDC pumps are so narrow, you can convert this to a DDC style, and then it's real flush. And with the fact that you have one rad and potentially 2 blocks, that'd be plenty of pump, and then you can probably fit it in front of the pump. So that's another thing that you can consider with this build. All right, so that's the Singularity Computers Absolute Impact. It is all metal. It can scratch easily. I think I got a few nicks in it just from today. There are some areas of improvement I think that can be had on this, but that's true for just about any product. Not sure I'm gonna use this one personally. I do like the smaller footprint of it. I'm just a little concerned with the single 420 running something like, say, a 4090 and a high core count CPU. So with that said, I'm gonna get on out of here, guys. Sound off down in the comments below how you feel about this sort of stuff. I will always support Singularity Computers. They are a very independent, small company coming up with some of the most out of the box, like, thinking and philosophy when it comes to building computers, and they are water cooling enthusiasts and always have been building amazing water cooling rigs. That's actually how Singularity started, was just doing customer builds, and it was using like Case Labs cases and a lot of EK water blocks type of parts and such, and basically just doing client builds, and then decided I want to also start manufacturing, designing my own products, and this is what comes of that. This is not easy, and this is not cheap to do. So the fact that they can even do the standard version, I think it was $249 or somewhere around there, or even the one with the water-cooled edition for $369, given what a lot of the main like mass-produced people are coming up with in terms of cost to value or like performance, I think you're getting more for your money with something like this. But it's obviously different, and it's only gonna appeal to a very select kind of crowd, and that is the Singularity Computers crowd. They know who their crowd is, and that's who they're building for. All right, guys, sound off though down below how you feel about this. I kind of like the GPU sticking out of the case like that. It reminds me of old mods we used to have to do where something didn't fit. We just cut a big ass hole and said they're just like, here, have a hole that's already there. Let your bulge show, essentially, is what this is.